Good morning. We're glad you're joining Rudy and me for the study of Isaiah. Today's lesson should be two old bald guys struggling to understand the Bible.
True.
So Rudy had said in earlier days that this section of Isaiah corresponds to the Gospel of John. And I think you've heard me say, if you haven't, you're going to hear me now, that the Gospel of John is shallow enough for a baby to wade in. It's deep enough for a grown man to drown in. And that's true for this passage. And we're going to try not to drown. There's some things we can understand, and we're going to take a stab at a couple of things.
There's a lot of red lines on your Bible.
I have underlined a lot. So Isaiah chapter 61, verse 5, strangers shall stand and feed your flocks. Foreigners shall till your land and dress your vines. But you shall be called priests of the Lord. You shall be named ministers of our God. You shall enjoy the wealth of the nations, and in their riches you shall glory. Because their shame was double, and dishonor was proclaimed as their lot. Therefore they shall possess a double portion. Everlasting joy shall be theirs. Now in a minute I'm going to talk about a priest, because I have been kind of a clergy person for a long time. I can understand that. But I'd like you to set this passage, Rudy, in the context as being a Jewish person who obviously you have ties to Israel and what God's done with the Hebrew people since Abraham. You weren't friends with Abraham, but you know some of the study.
I am a Levite, though, and so my family has passed that from son to son for all these generations.
Explain what a Levite is.
Levite is the family that the priests come from, and they were the judges of Israel as well.
Right.
There were certain cities which we'll study in Deuteronomy coming up,
right,
that were Levitical cities, and they were like today's county seats.
Right.
And so if you had a problem, you'd go to the county seat and get it adjudicated by a Levite or a group of Levites, and if it was too hard, it would go to the next level of Levites, and eventually it would go to the high priest.
Right. So let me ask you this. Is this section referring to God's plan for Jewish people, do you think?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
But also the people that join themselves to him.
And that would be through Jesus Christ?
Right.
Right. Okay.
The gospel was always for everybody. It had to have a place to get started, and Israel was the place to get started. And God basically lets us in on their role in this a little bit by saying that they get a double portion.
Right.
And the double portion goes to firstborn. A firstborn son always gets a double portion. So like if a family had 5 men in it, 5 sons,
right,
it would be a lot. The property of the father would be divided by 6, and the oldest son would get 2, and then everybody else would get an equal portion of one of the other portions.
Right, right. So when you read these verses, what are you thinking? What are you thinking about in terms of being one of those firstborn?
Well, I'm thinking about everything God ever said about us Jewish people, that, we're hard-headed and got foreheads of brass. And, it's just like me today. I'm so full of iniquity, bad thoughts. Even though most of them don't get out, I'm still, I don't know why God saved me, or what God would even think about me. But the fact is that it's always been grace.
Yeah.
And there has been a trial for Jews throughout history.
Right.
Not just in World War II, but all along.
Correct.
But the evil one has been trying to get rid of the people of God. And my worry is that we're not solid citizens in Christianity when he begins to work on us, because we're the people of God as well. I do believe that we're going to have some frustrating times, because that's part of the inheritance of the people of God.
Right.
There are trials and tribulations, but the way that we overcome them is knowing that eventually we win.
Yeah.
We win because he comes back and saves us.
Right.
And the double portion is actually telling us the same story.
Yeah.
That in the future, when there are other peoples with you and you're in the promised land, just like the children of Israel got into the promised land, when you, all of us, become part of this group and are in the promised land, we all will be moving towards a goal of making the place better.
Right.
But Israel will have a double portion because God said the firstborn gets a double portion.
Right. So how I sort through this, and I'm really benefiting. I'm right now doing some study in Deuteronomy, getting ready for that. The way I sort through this is I am in awe about the Exodus. And if you can imagine trying to take the entire metropolitan area of Kansas City,
that's what it would be,
and say, we are now going to move out of this country that is the biggest superpower in the world, and we are going to leave them. We're going to cross a sea on dry land, and we're going to get to a new land. That's the size of the miracle that was involved. Try organizing 1.5 million people or 2 million people to all move at once, to have everything in order.
Not only that, water, the food necessary to feed all these people. How many grocery stores are there in Kansas City?
Right.
You know, it just everything just gets more and more miraculous.
Right. So with all that being said, when we look at a passage like the one we're seeing in Isaiah, where God's saying, I'm going to do this with Jewish people, and tragically there are many, many secular Jews now. There are oppressive things all around them in terms of just the hard things that they have to deal with as a nation. But I'm going to do this, God's miracle. Let me take one more thought here, and I'm going to draw this out on the board if I can. No, I'm not either, because I just dropped my pen. It's all right. Let me give you a picture about what the priest is, because we all get to play that role. So a priest, and he says, we're going to make you priests. A priest is someone, God is up here, other humans are down here, if you can see that. And the priest stands in the middle. The priest puts a hand on God and says, God, we need help for these people down here. And the priest also puts a hand out to the people down here and says, come on, come with me, and let's go meet God. I'd been better if I could have drawn that, but I didn't want to try to pick up my pen. I hope you get that. We, Jews and Gentiles alike, get to play that role for humanity.
Exactly, that we are not everything. There's 7 or 8 billion people on the earth, and we are less than one.
Right.
And for God so loved the world, it's all about everybody.
Right. So our encouragement to you is look for God's miracle and look for your role in participating in what God's doing in the earth. Rudy, thank you for today. One more thought.
One more thought. One of the attributes of a priest is he speaks well of the Lord.
Let's do it. Nicely put. Speak well of the Lord. See you tomorrow.